Very good. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got a number of people that are here. So first of all, big thank you to the folks who have come to listen into this wonderful panel, and a big welcome to all of you. I want to introduce our amazing panelists here. So first we have Lane Holt, who was just talking, Director of Client Outcomes at Gainsight. So say a quick hey, Lane.
Hello. It's great to be here today with everyone.
Yes, good to have you. We also have Jay Held, who is the VP of Learning and Client Performance at Fiserv. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
I guess I should have everyone say where you're broadcasting from. So, Jay, where are you coming to us from?
I am broadcasting from beautiful Brookfield, Wisconsin.
Very nice. And Lane?
We are in a nice and toasty Austin, Texas today.
Oh, very toasty. Good. And I'm coming from Denver, which is also very toasty right now. And then last but not least, we have Jill Wallace, who is the VP of Content Strategy and Development at MasterCard. Welcome, Jill. Thanks for joining.
Hi. Thank everyone for joining. And I'm coming from St. Louis, Missouri.
And it's probably pretty warm there too now, right?
It's really warm and very
Muggy.
humid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, it's not humid where Lane and I are, so we're lucky about that. All right, so just a few quick rules. First of all, for those of you who are watching, we can't see or hear you, so don't worry about your cats coming into the picture or your kids screaming in the background since they're not at school yet. You know, those things won't matter. If you do want to say anything, please use the Q&A panel to ask questions of the presenters. You can also use the chat to present questions to the rest of the audience. So if you hear something compelling and you really just want to kind of put it out there to your colleagues, go ahead and stick it in the chat. We want to have a good, robust chat going on at the same time. So that's great. Today, we are talking about blind spots. And by blind spots, I mean both the things that we're fully aware of that we don't know, and those things that are so hidden from us that we can't even predict that we don't know them. So we're talking about the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. And I'm going to go through a few sort of causes of blind spots first. Then we're going to hear from the panelists on ways that they are exposing these blind spots and even overcoming some of them. So to get us started, I want to go through 4 sort of primary causes of blind spots. This is not an exhaustive list. Certainly there's other stuff. The first is, we as human beings can't have perfect knowledge in everything or really in anything. So imperfect knowledge is one of the biggest causes of blind spots. Bias, as we know, geographical biases, demographic biases, confirmation bias, selective listening, overestimation of skills and knowledge. These are all things that kind of lump into this idea of bias that change how we perceive things and sometimes lead to blind spots. Data maturity can be a biggie, right? Like lacking access to the right data, lack of alignment on how to view the data that we do have. These are things that can sometimes cause blind spots for us. And then not looking upstream to see what's causing downstream effects. So the sort of tunnel vision of only looking at the specific problem and not looking at the root causes, that can cause blind spots. So those are 4 that are 4 basic ones. So to the panelists, so I'm wondering which of these causes of blind spots or other causes, if you have other causes, have you witnessed, and how do they impact your team? So Lane, I'm going to start with you.
Thanks, Megan. One of the things that I've run into, and with many organizations as well, is sometimes the data is not married together appropriately. And so you might have data in one source, maybe your usage data, and then another in like Google Analytics or your product. And so that data might have different identifiers. And when it's not married together, you start to see these gaps, or you don't know back to your point earlier, you don't know what you don't know. And so when you're trying to drive that adoption of the platform, it's really hard, and really making sure someone's using your service. One thing that we also want to look for, is a term we use here at Gainsight, is we want to look for watermelon accounts. So those are accounts that are green on the outside, so you think they're really healthy, but they're red on the inside. And that's because your data is not married together to help you see that. And so as you're looking forward and making sure you're marching towards your quarterly metrics, you want to make sure that all of those data sources really support how you see that.
I love that idea of watermelon metrics. I'm going to use that. Jill, what do you think of watermelon metrics and the answer to the question?
I love watermelon metrics, and I'm going to steal it as well and tell that to my team too. But it's that tunnel vision that gets me, Megan, when we are so close to our product, so close to our content that we think it's fabulous. So the customer is telling us, that's good, but I want X, Y, and Z. And we go off, like it's a brown cow, and we go off and we build this brown cow. We think it's the best brown cow in the world. And then they go, well, I wanted a brown cow that runs. I didn't want one that was just a statue. So it's really not tuning in to the customer and asking those more in-depth questions so that you can get to what kind of problem they're trying to solve and get to validation where, okay, does this solve your problem, and coming back to them. So I think we make the most mistakes when we react to those customer, requests, don't validate it, and then we roll out the product, and then we're really shocked when we hear from our customers that that's not exactly what I wanted. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. So it's getting to, that book about the chocolate principle. You have all these different flavors of chocolate, just trying to figure out what flavor do they need.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And customers obviously are very impacted by these blind spots that we have. Interesting insight there. So Jay, I want to switch it up just a little bit for you. So I want to talk about the difference between these known unknowns and then those blind spots we can't even predict. So can you tell us about some of the blind spots that you've experienced recently and really define for us whether they were those known unknowns or if they were the ones that came from the left field with no awareness?
Certainly. Day to day, there are unknowns that we deal with. We're a part of our organization is software development, and we support that, right? We try to make sure the clients can best utilize it. So as an agile team changes user stories, we know it's going to happen. It's usually driven by customer need, but it becomes a known unknown because we have to constantly adapt to our inputs that are coming in. I think another really good example, and it's really building off of what Jill just talked about, it's the known unknowns between what our salespeople talk about to our clients as they're working so hard to meet the client's needs, and with all the right rationale behind it. Sometimes there's either a misunderstanding of what the norm might be, or it might just be something that's offered that's brand new. And it really causes us to adapt to that constantly evolving situation. From an unknown perspective, well, I think the one that we can all talk about is COVID, right? COVID hit us, it hit us pretty hard. But as we're coming out of COVID, and I pray that we are, we're seeing other unpredictable unknowns, right? So for example, my understanding was that as we came out of this, our clients were going to be looking for a graduated increase in travel. But honestly, we're seeing this almost instant demand, this desire for interpersonal connection that isn't what we really scheduled for and planned for. So it's requiring a lot of adaptation on our part. And along with it, the expectations of our clients has seemed to have changed. I think that they're looking for more personalization. And Jill talked about the brown cow, not a statue, but one that's running. I have to concur. I really believe that is a huge unknown as we start to reconnect with our clients in a different way. And so we have to make certain that while we think we know their journey, we think we know what they want, we have to understand that that's really a blind spot, that we don't have perfect knowledge and we're using our own biases here. And so we have to collaborate more.
And Jay, when you're talking about those unknowns, I think that what we're seeing is that the customer are evolving and changing because of these unknown inputs as well, right?
Yes.
And we have to figure out what are the new blind spots that we're seeing, and predict those or go out and try to uncover them. Correct?
Absolutely. Our ability to really look at things from their perspective and to get rid of the bias of the way we always do things is absolutely huge right now if we expect our clients to adopt our products, our services, right? To become those loyal customers. It becomes huge that we use outside in thinking.
And I think a big data source into that is the feedback and responses to surveys that we get from customers. And so when we are actively asking for their input in a way like that, and we are going to get it and then acting on it. So sometimes we get survey responses and we let them just sit there and we don't take action on them, but being able to act upon that to uncover those blind spots and actively look for them to make sure that we're helping our customers and our organization, helping us both succeed.
Yeah, that's so right. I mean, if you're getting feedback, that hopefully is opening up some of those blind spots and exposing them to you. But if you're doing nothing with it, then what's the point, right? So very, very good points. All of those were great, great points. So I think we've done a lot of really good definition of the known unknowns and those sort of unpredictable unknowns. I love the examples that you gave, Jay. And so I think we have a good idea of what we're talking about with blind spots. I want to move into exposing and overcoming the blind spots. So again, I'm going to just start with a few ideas of how we can expose our blind spots, or maybe factors that are required in order to make sure that we're not allowing our blind spots to take us down. So the first would be, you have to acknowledge that you have them. I mean, it's sort of the Alcoholics Anonymous sort of, if you're in denial, you're not going to get over it mentality. If you think you don't have blind spots, first of all, that is a blind spot, but you have to acknowledge that you have blind spots. And then you have to be willing and able to seek out different perspectives. So we'll talk a little bit about how that plays out with our team in getting, diverse group of people and getting diverse feedback. We also need to align the team on what's really important to track, because there are some blind spots maybe that don't matter to us, but there are ones that really could make a difference in the customer experience. So we want to make sure that we're tracking those. And then I think to your point, Lane, you need programs that focus on root causes, fix the root causes for your customer, and close the loop on all that wonderful feedback that you're getting. So knowing that, Jay, I'm going to start with you this time. Can you give me an example of a strategy you've implemented to overcome a blind spot?
One of the first that leaps to my mind is really evaluating the team and reorganizing it. As an example, what I've done recently with my group is we've really made a push to move from areas of expertise into, we could say cross-functional teams, but I think it's even expanding skill sets within individuals to make them better equipped to respond to what the customers are looking for. I oftentimes refer to it as a small hardware store mentality. You walk into a mom and pop hardware store, you ask where the screws are, somebody walks you there. They might be a specialist in paint, but they still take you to where the screws are. So I think, first of all, it is really about aligning your team to deliver on what the client expectations are, right? Building on that, though, what we have undertaken is building this culture of what if. And I think this is around breaking down biases that we have as people. I was in a meeting earlier today where somebody on the team made the comment, we've always done this way. It was done 20 years ago when I started, and I don't know how long ago it was done before that. And so it's creating this mindset where associates start to ask, what if we did it differently? And if we started down that journey, what's next, right? So start to predict the success of a process change that you're trying to put in. And then I would offer that the last thing I would share is that, and I mentioned it before, the importance of getting everybody to switch from inside out thinking, let's do it my way, to outside in thinking. And this is a huge push with my department. So we've built the CX team. We've actually created a physical board game that every single associate plays when they start with us. It's got 5 phases to match the phases of our client journey. And through it, they learn what their fellow associates are doing. But there's also somebody playing the part of the client and working through what their needs are to try and set the stage. We've written a book on positivity and passion, and every single person, 120 folks on my team, contributed to that book to share experiences and tips and tricks. We've built out new mission statements around this what if culture. And we're working very hard to calculate how to measure it. So I really believe it's a holistic approach that's rooted deeply in the people that you're asking to serve the clients. Long answer, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. That was fascinating. I absolutely love the board game idea. I love that you had your team write a book. And I know people that work for you and they love working for you. And, you know, it's because you do things like this and you empower them in fun ways to really serve the customer well. So Lane, what do you have to say? Do you have an example? Do you want to touch on what Jay said?
Yeah, I mean, Jay, I love that. I was just taking some notes and I'm trying to figure out how to create my own board game over here at Gainsight. But when we're really looking at how to overcome those blind spots, that was the part of the question here is how do we find the blind spots? And one of the things that I talk about with my team is we can't miss the forest for the tree. And so when you're looking at one tree and you see this beautiful oak tree and it is beautiful and it's big, but like what else is around it? You know, there's so much life in a forest that you can really look to. And so with that, you can get really focused on one piece of data or one situation, and then you miss the other pieces. So we really work with my team on educating them on what to look for. What do you need to be aware of? And what are some things that will help you understand what might be a blind spot? Being able to create those alerts, take actions for it, and really also helping hold the team accountable for it. One example that I like to give is being curious. And so when I've worked with some organizations, we were working on a project that we thought would show us when customers were at risk. We saw a huge drop in adoption. We said, wait a second, those customers are all at risk. And so we would create an alert, we would reach out to the customer, hey, we really want to help you in what's going on here, help us understand. And 99% of those customers that we reached out to said, actually, we were really successful. Like you helped us be really successful. And you saw the decline because it was after an event that we had. We had an event and it was very successful. We had no issues with your service. And now we were able to build those case studies. So because we were actively looking for risks or for blind spots, we uncovered opportunities. And so if we're not actively looking to find those blind spots, and one of the things that as you know, we're starting to build out my team even more, one of the things that I want to help hold my team accountable for is things like finding a blind spot every quarter. So how do we set that of like, you need to go and try and find one, and not saying like you have to find one, but I want to see the proactivity to, I've noticed something's wrong here or something doesn't seem right. So almost like the flip of it being on an engineering team trying to uncover bugs and bug smash, but instead looking at it from a customer lifecycle and journey perspective. Where's a gap? Where are we not providing what we need to really help accelerate ourselves, help us grow, help us flex more muscles? To Jay's point, how do we make sure that more people are doing similar things or can at least help provide guidance to others?
Well, that's interesting, Lane, because it goes back to what you're talking about with data and ensuring that you're marrying that data, because like you said, you could interpret a drop in adoption as something wrong, but going back and looking at the data and asking those more in-depth questions, you found out it's actually a good thing. So that's really good.
Yeah, that is. I mean, it really drives home the point that you can't just look at the data and make assumptions. And I think people do this today more than ever. I mean, the past year is a big example where we take this fact and this fact and this fact, and we put them together in a way that's based on biases or perspective, and we come up with an assumption that may or may not be right. So in this case, it was a very logical assumption that you made, that they weren't adopting or adoption went down, therefore they're in trouble. But good for you for diving deeper and really, uncovering that sort of blind spot that you had, which was adoption might not always equal success, right? So very nice, very nice. Jill, so we've talked in the past about some very tactical examples of things that you've done to uncover blind spots. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your UX feedback example that we've chatted about in the past.
Sure. So this is just very recent, so it's top of mind for me. But we were about to roll out an upgrade to our platform, and someone said, well, have you done a user focus group? And we were like, no. And that's the first step, right? You want to find out how will your customers accept this new functionality that you're presenting. We were really excited about it, and we're ready to roll it out. And it was kind of like, well, that's going to delay things a little bit, but we were glad that we did. Number one, because we're really happy with it. We thought our customers are going to be happy with it too, right? And the good news is that they were happy, so they said, this is fabulous. I really like it. But in addition, we found some blind spots that, because we're so close to it and we're looking through that one lens, like you talk about, Jay, we didn't see some of the things that were right there staring us in our face. And it was some simple things, like we changed the name of one of the functionalities in the platform, and they're like, what is that? I don't understand what that is. And the funny thing is that they'd been clicking on the same button, but it took them to a different page, and that page didn't reference what they thought it was going to have. So it was like, even though they liked the new functionality, they were really stuck on the fact that I don't know what this terminology is that you're using. So it really gave us that aha moment where it's really important, again, to let your customers weigh in on some of these things. The good news is that we were able to correct some of those blind spots before we rolled it out to the general public. And I think in the end, it's going to lead to a higher, better customer experience, is what we're always striving for.
That's awesome. And because we've had many conversations, I know that you're constantly tracking your NPS, and that a lot of the goals that you have are around getting that NPS score up. So I imagine you're using that as a way to check, but finding those blind spots, I think, was interesting. So doing UX surveys, doing customer surveys, looking at assumptions differently, diving into the data, and then maybe taking different pieces of data. These are all really, really good examples of how we can at least expose our blind spots, if not overcome them. So that's awesome.
And that's true, Megan, and I'm sorry, but one of the other things that was critical to that too is that we took ourselves out of the equation. So we let the customers go in and guide the journey, which is also, because if we ask them leading questions, we're going to get to the answer that we're expecting instead of the answer, like if they're actually using the product and understanding the product. So that's a key component as well.
Absolutely. And watching them is key, because sometimes they will report that it makes total sense, but when you actually watch them, they might fumble a bit. And so watching them is different than asking them in many ways.
That is such a true statement. And recently we started to roll out a new type of learning, online learning, that was created. And because we were watching our learners, we found that they really didn't like it. But when we did follow-up questions, what we discovered is that if we added about a 60-second video at the onset, the perspective of the person going through the training changed 180%. So it was a case where we weren't completely off the mark, but we also weren't really doing a good enough job of capturing the wants and needs of the user. And as soon as we adjusted that, it was an easy fix. All of a sudden, our adoption rate for that went way, way up. So that, Jill, I couldn't agree more. You've got to get from the customers. Megan, I agree. You've got to watch them. It's more than just asking questions.
Very nice. That's a great
So-
example. Lane, go ahead.
I'm gonna pile in on this one a little bit. So Jill talked about UX and the way that they guided that, and it made me think back to some of my days working in websites and things where Steve Krug has a book called "Don't Make Me Think." So how do we make sure that our users don't have to think about what they're doing next? And I'm applying this back to the customer journey and customer success, and it's the same thing. How do we make sure our customers don't have to think about what's next? They just know, and they're able to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it reminds me of something that you mentioned one time when we were talking, where you were talking about the customer journey and how you don't have perfect data and you sometimes have to make assumptions. And you had some really good advice that I'm hoping you can repeat here about like not going down rabbit holes. Do you remember our conversation?
I do. So earlier this year, we stood up my team here at Gainsight around digital success. So we are here to really support the entire customer journey and how do you progress along that. And so as we're building out our new programs and our new experiences, we could very easily start going down rabbit holes around data and how do we make sure that Jill does these 4 things and Megan does these 4 things. But if we don't start to kind of group them together and allow us to use directionally accurate data. So we found out I think I spent like maybe an hour looking at some data to find out that like we knew there's a certain point if customers weren't lime or green for healthy active users, so users logging in consistently into the platform, that they were 8 times more likely to churn. And so when we saw that, we didn't spend a whole week or things like that. We said, wait a second, like directionally accurate. We know that people need to be logging in the system. Now we have a guidance on the timing of when we need to get them there. And so we started making decisions around our programs based off of having directionally accurate data. And so when I was talking to someone yesterday about this as well, and they asked like, well, what's directionally accurate? And I'm like, well, you can make a few assumptions that with quick testing, you know, are correct. And so looking at a set of data saying, yep, that looks directionally accurate because it aligns with what we've seen, but still being able to ask those questions as you go, spend a little bit more time on it. And then if it doesn't look directionally accurate, revisit that again. Did I cover everything that you remembered us talking about?
Yes. I love it. And the thing I love about it reminds me of the whole fail fast methodology, which some people love, some people hate, you know, whatever your feelings about it. The idea really is pick that direction, start charging forward. And then if you notice, if you're going the wrong direction, you want to notice quickly, right? You don't want to wait until you're all the way across town. You want to know right off the bat, nope, I need to go this way, so you can pivot. So I really like that. Jay, did you have something to add?
You know, I look at when we're trying to determine direction and we're looking at it, we don't have all of the data. Whatever we're doing is really a hypothesis, right? And so when you're trying to drive an organization, a team toward a hypothesis, the whole notion of, just like in science, trying to disprove your hypothesis becomes important. And now we're back to the data, right? Because you have to have data. But one of the things that I always like to do is not only create a metric or a KPI to track it, but I like to create a complementary KPI that is going to it's going to reduce my likelihood of making false assumptions about data, right? So for example, we're working on a new dashboard using Power BI to make it more interactive. And we were tracking revenue as a goal or excuse me, as a method to understand adoption. Well, by itself, that's very, very faulty, right? So it was a matter of stepping back and understanding there's another system from which we can pull data that will cross-reference the effectiveness of our revenue and validate the revenue is truly a good enough indicator. It lets us look one layer deeper to validate a hypothesis is still going forward. So completely agree, Lane.
I
To
love
your
that.
hypothesis point there, Jay, I would say that helps me. You brought this up, and it really helps me. And now thinking about this a little more, directionally accurate data helps you decide what your hypothesis is and be able to start testing it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, very nice. And I also love that you talked about complementary data. I often talk about tension metrics. So for example, I heard of a team one time that was gold on how many knowledge articles they created. So it was a support team, and someone said, okay, well, we want all of our people to create X number of articles. So the support team said, oh, okay, well, I can do that. So what did they do? They went into the help content, copied it, pasted it into an article, and then said, look, I created an article. So that metric that they were gold upon was actually creating bad behavior. So if you add a tension metric to say, I don't know, knowledge articles must be related to cases X% of time, or something that makes it so that more and more and more content is not good if it's not somehow relevant to a current case or something like that. So I love the complementary metric idea. So we talked a little bit about team, and Lane, you kind of went into team a little bit, and I want to move us in that direction. So I'd love to hear how you guys structure your team specifically to mitigate the risk of blind spots. So Jill, I know you've got a good perspective on this. Can you start us off?
Absolutely. So it goes from, as you said, right at the top of the hour, about getting that global view, hiring a diverse team, ensuring that not everybody's the same, that you have people all over, and my team is all over the globe. So we do have that diverse team, which will have different perspectives, and people even at different times of their life. You know, you have the millennials, and you have the baby boomers, and people raising children. Everyone has a different perspective that they're going to bring. And by hearing all those different voices, you're going to uncover things that you yourself personally wouldn't be thinking about. And then you marry that with getting diverse customer feedback. So it's important for us to ensure that we're hitting all of our customer base, not just one segment, but hitting multiple segments, because they're going to use your product differently, and they're going to have different needs from your product. So it's very important. And then you kind of layer that on top of what we're talking about, that directionally data, making sure that my team understands what the goal is, what the focus should be, so that they're able to uncover the blind spots because they know where we're trying to get to. And they can say, hey, Jill, we're not going to get there by going this way. Maybe we should include X, Y, and Z. So making sure that you have all of those diverse ideas, and I almost forget, you know, learning from someone else's mistakes. I don't need to make the same mistake someone else did. If they did it for me and already traveled that road, then I am so happy just to sponge off of them and make that better. So just getting those global views is very important.
Awesome. So Jay, first of all, do you agree with Jill? And then also you had a story about how you hire specifically to sort of fill shoes in your organization.
You know, I absolutely agree with Jill. Diversity in hiring, inclusiveness, I think it's absolutely essential. I'm also blessed because I've got a team that's around the globe. So we kind of inherently get a little bit of that. But I just think it's absolutely critical that there's a focus on that inclusion. I will add one thing to that, because we are so focused on supporting clients, and our clients are going to have different needs so much that I look a lot at hiring people that have been in the shoes of our clients, that outside in thinking isn't a forced activity, but rather it's where they're from. And I think that that really helps us better understand and then react to what our clients are looking for. Now, the drawback is that, in my opinion, after about 2 years, the blinders start to come up because, well, I'm still relying on what I did before. However, things have changed in a couple of years. And so I think it is incredibly important to be able to continually inject new ideas, new blood into that model so that you've always got somebody who's recent. And the issue with that is the rest of your team needs to hear their voice. Okay, they cannot be relegated to some lower standing because they're new. They have to be seen and recognized by all levels of leadership as incredibly vital people to the organization, and that their voice is equal to, and I won't say this to everybody on my team, even though I'm saying it here, is that sometimes it's more important than some of the voices of your most tenured people. So that's one of the big strategies for me to try and drive this. But another is going to be relationship maps. Everybody on my team is expected to have a relationship map. It's expected to be updated annually. My managers go through and check theirs. Mine is updated on almost a weekly basis. And I use an Excel spreadsheet at this point. Megan, you're on my...
You can find what you mean by that?
Yes.
Relationship map?
We started them all off with people drawing themselves in a circle of a big piece of packing paper. We would give them a 3-foot by 4-foot piece of packing paper and some colored markers, and then they would start drawing other circles attached to it and putting in the names of people that they work with and what they go to them for. And for some of us, the page just gets too large, so we've gone to Excel, right? But it's the name, what's their role, what do you go to them for, what's the contact information. But it gives you a measurable way to ensure that relationships are expanding. It reinforces developing that diversity and inclusion that Jill was talking about. It is absolutely huge. And Jen is saying internal and external, right? If I have an associate who goes out sick for a month and they're working on a big project, I can just go to their relationship map and pick the project up. So not only does it give me business continuity, but I think it starts to point out blind spots early on because there's more communication. And it helps you solve those blind spots more readily because you can bring in more people very quickly.
Jay, I love that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jill.
I love that you're doing that. Do you also look at the types of relationships to ensure that they're diverse as well?
Absolutely. The reason that they got multiple colored markers was because we wanted to use those different colors to signify different categories, right? So a simple example might be sales is blue, finance is green. But when you move to Excel, you have the ability to use filters on those areas of focus, and the managers will work with the associates. The intent is that they actually look at the relationship map and look for holes and then guide them, right? So a big part of our development plans for associates is experiential learning and building the network. So by using the relationship map, we have something tangible to make sure that we're introducing associates to folks that they should know. It'll help them later in their career. It'll help them solve problems today.
One way that we did that kind of at my last organization, Jay, was when new hires started, we bought them all 24 cookies So they would walk around the office and have to hand out their cookies, because who wants to eat 2 dozen, and they were warm cookies when they were delivered. Who wants to eat 2 dozen warm cookies at once? So they had to like,
I'm a cookie.
well, we mixed it up. So you'd have like chocolate chips, snickerdoodle, peanut butter. So and they'd introduce themselves to other people in the office and give out cookies to help build that. So maybe not as much in the COVID, post-COVID world would people do that. But
Right.
I want to tie back to what you were saying on the first part of it around diversity. And so Jill, you talked about diversity. Jay, you did as well. For me, diversity is really important. And sometimes we focus a lot on, do we have diverse cultures and diverse, like, gender representation and things like that. But sometimes we miss out on something else that's really important, and that's diverse experience. And so with that, one of our key values and core values here at Gainsight is called Shoshin, which means beginner's mindset. And so I can have someone who's been at Gainsight for 7 years. And to your point earlier, like, we're doing the same thing over and over again. We're back to our blinders, we know. But if I have someone who has the skill sets, or can at least have relatable skill sets to the role that I need them to fill, they can come in and bring a different view into it. We had a company kick off a couple of years ago, and we brought in a former Disney Pixar exec, and he talked about the naive expert. And so we've done our best to incorporate that. So what we mean by that is the person who isn't the one who you would expect to have like the answer. And so I think, Megan, last time you and I talked about this, you had a picture that your kid drew of a house in the background. And what I want to talk about here is, like, if I were to ask everyone on this call today to draw a picture of a house, and you did it right now, it would have a roof, maybe a chimney, a door, and 2 windows. And that's just because that's how we've always seen it done. But if you bring a child into the mix and you say, draw me a picture of a house, you might have a 2-story house, a 4-story house. It might have a garage. It might have a swing set in the front, because they're coming into it without having that preconditioned, this is what it looks like. And so when you're able to diversify the experience on your team, you're going to get that. I was reflecting back on this in a conversation that I had a couple hours ago, where myself and someone else within Gainsight, we're building a new process that we should, like, if people looked at it and said, you're building a renewal motion, like, we would not be the people you would expect. I don't have a sales background at all. And the other person is more in operations. And so we're building out this renewal process, but we're bringing to it the things, a different perspective. We're bringing to it, what should the customer do? What milestones do we know that we need to have to be successful on all sides? And so far, I mean, we're 6 months into it, we've been successful. And we're not the people that you would expect to build this, because we've been able to bring that Shoshin and that naive expert into this mix.
That's awesome. I love that. All of you, like, just amazing ideas here. And, Jen keeps saying she loves all this too. So Jen's happy. So for those of you in the audience, we have about 15 minutes to go, and I want to make sure we get to your questions. So definitely put your questions in the Q&A panel. If you want it just to come to the panel, you can mark it just to the panel. I think there's an option to put it out to everyone as well, so that everyone else can see it. But definitely keep getting those in, and we'll answer those in just a bit. So start getting those in. The next question that I want to dive into is, what organizational or external factors either help or hinder you from sort of digging up or exposing these hidden unknowns? So kind of what gets in the way of exposing these unknowns? So Jay, I know you had some good examples of this. You want to go ahead and start?
Certainly, thank you. I think one of the areas where I feel that we're being hindered is the decrease in unemployment and this shift around of employees from organization to organization that we're experiencing right now. So we're seeing, I think many organizations are seeing levels of attrition that are higher than what we would like. And it can take a serious investment of time to bring somebody fully up to speed, right? And in some of my roles, it's 1.5 to 2 years. As we deal with the attrition, it really impacts our bandwidth to be able to spend the heartbeats uncovering more blind spots, right? So Lane mentioned earlier, everybody should uncover one a month. And one of the big struggles right now is that it's difficult to get the regular work done and add that to it. So I'm afraid that in many cases, what happens is trial by fire. We might get bruised and then we're reacting to the blind spot instead of proactively uncovering it. So that, I think, is one of the big hindrances. I think one of the things that's helping is that I'm getting more interaction directly from our clients. I'm since, and this is a very recent occurrence where I am getting more and more FaceTime to understand what their problems are. I haven't been able to understand why the change, but recently there has just been this desire to connect and share their thoughts that we're working very hard to take advantage of and uncover the blind spots.
I think a piece of why that's happening, Jay, is COVID. I've been an always remote employee at my time at Gainsight, and I feel more personally connected to people since COVID has happened, customers and coworkers, because of the fact that we are all like this. Everyone sees it into your home now, and we're all in the same boat. We're all on level playing grounds from like who we can connect with.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes two ways. I think COVID leapt us into this arena where corporations had to show their values. They had to make changes. They had to make tough decisions, right? And so they sort of showed their values, and employees either line up with those values or they go, oh, wait, I don't really line up with the values of my organization anymore. So I think it's both bringing us closer if we line up with the values, because now we're all in, right? Like we're face to face with everybody, but it also is causing that that sort of big motion of people quitting. I mean, it's all over the news, right? People are quitting their jobs like never before. So I think it really is all about values and how, there are going to be some companies that value having people in the office, and there are others that are going to value having a hybrid mentality. And there are other people that say, no, we value our people being wherever they are, and we appreciate that they did it remotely when they had to, so we're going to let them continue to do it. And all of those things are okay, but it might not be okay with everybody within the organization, right? So that's why we're seeing a lot of shifting. Anyway, Jill, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, of course. I 100% agree with you, Megan. And it's not just in the workplace and your personal relationships as well, because it's uncovered some blind spots that you maybe have had in your personal relationships, right? And you thinking, and I hear more and more from people, am I in the right place? Am I in the right role? Because it really, lets you start thinking about what your passion is. And if you're pulling away from it or you're moving more towards it. One of the things that we've done, and it goes back to what you said, Jay, is Mastercard does a really good job of moving people around the organization. So I came to my team completely newbie, but I brought in a different focus. And by doing that, you do get a chance to explore other areas, number one, and you do have that fresh look on how things can be. And when you're a new person, like you said, Lane, you're coming in with all of the what do they call it when you're capabilities, you have all of that potential ahead of you. And so and you are coming in with no biases whatsoever. So you do have a fresh look on things, and it does help to uncover things that people haven't thought about, or maybe they did and they tried it and they failed at it and they said, oh, we did that 5 years ago, it didn't work. Where a new person comes in and they go, well, I didn't know that, let's do it again. And they bring in that fresh look and that fresh excitement to the process. But then we are faced with, we're always faced with the bottom line. So budget constraints, like you said, Jay, can really hinder that uncovering those blind spots for us. We don't have the time or the money, or the initiative isn't prioritized. So it's a real struggle to get past that sometimes.
Sorry, had a hard time unmuting. Very, very good input there, Jill. Appreciate that. We do have only 8 minutes left, and I've got a few questions that I want to make sure we get to. So the first one is from Jen, and she says, to Lane's example of folks outside the process providing feedback and Jay's mention of blind spots, both great call outs, she says, would you advise perhaps asking folks outside your department to volunteer to be a part of the evaluation to get that insight you might not have considered? I am thinking right now I might want to have a process review committee to open up the feedback and gain that insight beyond what we know.
My opinion, absolutely, do it. One of the, we have a one-page strategic plan for my department, and one of those items right now is bursting cross-department communication barriers. It's even going to be an award in our annual awards presentation later this year, because getting those other opinions from other groups outside your own is really going to help uncover the blind spots. I couldn't support your decision more.
The piece that I would add to it is making sure both sides have the right expectation. Because you can say, hey, I'm gonna have this process review feedback, and then get people from like, well, what about this one over here? Or did you get like, this will impact this over here? And like, it needs to be very specific around the guidelines to it, but also make sure that you're fostering a community of understanding on your team to not knee-jerk react to it, to be like, oh, well, they just think that because of X, Y, Z. No, like, we're here to learn together. And yeah, learning is one of my top 5 in the strengths finders. So I'm always here to figure out like, how do I learn? Like we were meeting, you know, our quarter's ending, so we were doing some reviews, and the question to my team members is always, what did you learn? And so when you go into a session like that, making sure that there is the common understanding that we are here to learn. We're not here to say someone did something wrong or someone else did something right. We're really here to learn, to make sure that we're all successful together.
That's a really good point. Very nice. So hopefully that's hopefully that's a good answer for you, Jen. I think you got some good feedback there. Next question. What are common blind spots of C-levels when it comes to understanding the daily reality success and support teams are facing? Jill, do you want to start us off?
Oh boy.
Maybe I shouldn't have called you out.
Well, I think it's just what you just said, right? It's not understanding the day-to-day that goes on, and some issues are quite complex, right? And understanding those little intricacies are important. For example, if you have like a backlog of work that needs to be done, one of the first instincts that I've seen is let's throw some bodies at it. We'll just throw some bodies at it. And we had a recent example where that wasn't the answer, because what was broken was the process itself. So we had to take some time while we did throw the bodies at it. We had to take some outside time to figure out what was wrong in the process. So it's a common, thing. If you don't have all the answers, taking just a little moment to dig a little further into it and hit it from both sides. It's not just about the resources. It can also be about the time, materials, and tools that you're using.
Right. Yeah. C-levels definitely don't like when we jump right to we need more resources, but we also don't want to be scared to bring up that we need more resources either. So I love that you threw that balance in there. Lane, did you have something to add?
I just, when Jill mentioned backlog, everyone has a backlog. Everyone does. But for me, the most important thing is putting a date on all of them, of like when they came in. I was working with a company once, and we had such a backlog of support tickets. Our founder came in and said, you know what would happen if we just closed all those tickets? Any ticket older than 2 weeks, we're going to close it. Because his point of view was, if it's still an issue, they're going to come back and ask it again. And so when you look at that backlog, whether it's of the things that your team is doing, I know that I was helping a member on our ops team the other day, trying to throw a body at a problem of like, I was like, let me just help you work through some things. And we were looking through them like, the people who requested these 12 things aren't even here anymore. Like, can we just close them? And so it's that piece too of figuring out success and support and really figuring out, do we have the hardest part in anything that we do is taking a step back and being the person who says, we need to put a process in here, because everyone cringes for a moment and they're like, wait a second, that's going to take more effort now. But like knowing that in the long run, it's going to be successful. It's just like, I have to put more effort forth now versus just doing what we need to do.
And then that brings me to another perspective too, Lane. When you're saying close it, if I often hear, well, nobody's complaining about it anymore. And I said that becomes dangerous, because if they're not complaining about it, they don't even care about you anymore. And they've decided you are not worth my time, I'm going somewhere else. So it's important to also, and it marries back to the data, conversation, making sure that you have the right inputs and you're evaluating the data correctly as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Delicate balance for sure.
From my experience working with the C-suite to help them understand problems, first of all, has to start with understanding that what they do every day for the 10, 12, 16 hours a day that they work is different than what we might do for a day. They tend to be thinking long game as opposed to short game. So for me, it is being able to quantify the problem. It is being able to show you've done root cause analysis. It is being able to clearly articulate the impact of not doing something, whether that's lost revenue, lost customers, lower retention rates, whatever that is. But I also think it's important to link it to the long range plans, and B, socialize it with their influencers to have them help drive the point. Working with Megan and her company was a 2.5-year journey. And I made presentations for 2 years to anybody within this organization until we were finally able to get the right people to be on the bandwagon to drive it forward. So sometimes it's a game of persistence too with the C-level.
Totally agree. And we are at time. This was incredible, guys. I really, really thank you for all of your insights. It sounds like the audience thanks you as well. So that's very, very good. I think we can sort of sum it up on that C-level question as it's our job to expose their blind spots to them. So make sure that we're clear about that. This was really, really fun. Really enjoyed it. Jill, Lane, Jay, thank you. Thank you to everyone watching it. I'm Megan Gilhooly from Zoomin. Please reach out if you have any other questions, and enjoy the rest of your week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, all.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.